Go. Hello,
Hey
everybody.
everybody.
Oh,
Sorry.
yeah, we did. All right, I'll go. Hey, everybody. It is the Schmuck Shack, the secondhand political shit show. We are here with Triple B, myself, Kaiser, and Mr. Snake or Snake, or with Snake. And today, what are we talking about, fellas?
Well, we're gonna talk about who is it gonna be Trump's next nominee.
And the ripple effects of what the hell is happening right now. Currently, it is September 23rd, 8 p.m. roughly.
Yeah. And why? I mean, well, we sort of made a video of this, but it well, we've already talked a lot about this basically, but even if it isn't like aired,
Yeah,
but
we might not air it. We made two videos and we've been on a hiatus for a little bit. Life's been busy and I wasn't proud of the videos we made. They were just kind of crap. Anyway, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
yeah, but yeah, a lot. Literally, 2020 couldn't be like any more eventful, I guess I could say.
It's gonna
And the events have almost consistently been pretty bad.
yeah. 2020's been a shitty year in general.
Even for an election year. And that's with Trump in office. Although, I mean, I don't want to get too anti-Trump or anything, because it's really dumb to blatantly make I think it's what am I trying to say?
I guess maybe I can maybe you can tell me if this is what you're trying to say. I guess like you don't want to be too anti-Trump to the point where it's like illogical. Like there needs to be a balance, kind of like you can't be too you don't want to be too anti-Trump to the point where you have Trump derangement syndrome. But I get
Yeah,
what you're yeah.
yeah, because honestly, I get the feeling that I mean, a lot of the stuff he does is extremely corporatist. But I mean, all of these positions, no matter where they are on the political spectrum, like I will be more in favor of certain positions that are um more well, all I'm trying to say is if you were to chart my approval of a position, it would be percentile wise, just looking at it left to right. It will vary a lot from far left to far right. And that's not necessarily always going down, of course, because I'm not a fucking Nazbol. Um, although, well, I'm just not gonna comment on that.
Okay.
I'm just gonna point out it's like hey I'm just gonna point out that having believing in in more Keynesian economic policies, as well as believing that certain traditions are important. It doesn't have to make you an asshole.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Just as well, yeah, a good example of what we're talking about right now is China, because we've talked a lot about where they stand on a a political spectrum, And I'd say it's mostly like state capitalist, but I mean, maybe we should not delve like too much into political like analysis or anything.
Yeah.
Because state capitalist is inherently like authoritarian, which China's like on the verge of fascism.
Well, I wouldn't call it fascism exactly. I'd say because fascism is a very specific ideology. I wouldn't even really consider Hitler to be a fascist because fascism is like what originally fascism meant was like the political system that Mussolini and the Italian far right advocated for back in the 20s and 30s. Um, I know it's been used a lot as like kind of fascism has been used a lot interchangeably with the word authoritarian, which I think is like I guess fascism is definitely very authoritarian, but at the same time it's not exact like one and the same. I'd say it's
Yeah. I don't know, it's complicated. Anyway, getting right into it. Breonna Taylor. Let's just start with well, actually, I guess we're saving identity politics for later. So we'll jump straight into Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Recently passed. She'd been fighting, what was it, like
pancreatic cancer.
Yeah. Uh, for like 20 some years or something.
I think it's since 2010, I believe.
Oh.
I think, yeah, I think that's when her husband died too in 2010.
Yeah, I must be thinking of the time she spent on the court as a justice.
She's been there since '93.
Yeah, 27 years as a justice. So I guess just like jumping straight into some of the potential candidates that Trump has put forward as like Supreme Court justice nominees. Should we get like go? Yeah, go ahead.
So there are two front runners for the nominees. So the first one is like I think she's a professor from Notre Dame named Amy Coney Barrett, who is a she was described herself as an originalist. For those who don't know, an originalist is someone who interprets the Constitution to the way that the people who wrote it would have. So
That's epic.
it's like it's a constitutional philosophy where basically you believe that the Constitution was that the content in it is universal regardless of time, and the founders put it in there to remain the way it is. Like you should always interpret it the way it was written by the people who wrote it. So this is opposed to like the living Constitution theory, which is the belief that the Constitution is a living document and that the meaning of certain clauses in it changes over time. And this is kind of that was the philosophy of justices like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, as opposed originalism was the philosophy of justices like Antonin Scalia, who died 4 years earlier, and Clarence Thomas, who is still on the court right now. And it's kind of a more conservative philosophy of constitutional law versus living constitution theory, which is more the liberal philosophy or the progressive view of it. And then the other candidate for the nomination is a Florida judge named Barbara Lagoa, who doesn't really have. I guess she does. She doesn't have much of a record, which which definitely could benefit her, considering how other judges like Brett Kavanaugh, who've had a longer history, that's been used. I guess having a longer record definitely does work against you in things like this. So she doesn't have like the one thing that she is known for. I guess the big thing she's known for is she ruled on a law that required that in order for felons to be able to vote again, they have to like pay like a fee or something, which many have accused of being as being a modern day poll tax, and I don't know the specifics of it. Which I think she also identify. I don't know if she identifies as originalist or not. Anyway, I'm gonna put
I heard
this
she
out
was really
there.
anti-Marxist because she was Cuban, right?
Yeah, she is Cuban, and I'm gonna put this out here. I'm gonna put this out there. I think the politically better decision for Trump is to pick Lagoa because I think she can definitely win over a bunch more Cubans in Florida, securing Florida for him. And I think I think that would definitely help him. I think,
Yeah,
but
probably. I kind of doubt. Well, I mean, I think a lot of people have like people in college have like been a lot of people going into college have been going um to like Tampa Bay University or places like that recently. Um and technically there is like a liberal leaning in college students. Although I feel like that's really obviously that's a big generalization, but I feel like that's generally true. Um, if you look at like minorities or pluralities, rather, I guess.
yeah,
Um, so I could see the shift in uh like immediate political interests like that.
yeah. I think though, like, yeah, I mean, well, the thing is though, I guess when you're talking about demographics that vote a certain way, I think it's going to take more than just a judicial nominee in order to win over an entire demographic that usually votes against you. However, Cubans who generally they're like one of the few minority groups who actually do, I think, usually lean conservative, although I think they might be more on the fence. Because I think of second generation Cubans who identify more with the Hispanics broadly, which are more of a left leaning group versus the older Cubans who are more, I think, refugees and they remember. I think the idea of socialism in the Democratic Party kind of definitely turns them off, so they lean more to the Republicans. So it's kind of a more of a swing group now. But I think when it makes a big difference when you're talking about like because a judicial nomination could definitely sway a group to vote, sway a swing group to you instead of like a group that usually is kind of more against you. Uh, but like I get like yeah, I think but yeah, if I were Trump, I think I might go with I guess the politically advantageous way is to go with Lagoa. Although I don't know much about her judicial philosophy, which is why I guess if in principle I might would have I if I were if electoral politics didn't matter, I would have might have gone with I think it's Coney Barrett, right? Yeah, Coney Barrett. Um, I don't know because one thing that I think is important to me is the overturning of Roe v. Wade because I'm gonna be frank here. Roe v. Wade was a terrible decision, and it had basically really no. It doesn't really have much of a constitutional basis at all. It's more on the idea of like it's like kind of the more of the living constitution idea that's kind of with Roe v. Wade versus the an actual. I think originalism is the only way to really interpret the Constitution. Like, or that's kind of my belief. So,
I guess so. But consider the different forms of, I guess you could say, like, logic. Um, there are issues that in which there is always a set determined logic. Like you could say that about astrophysics or a lot of the hard sciences like biology. Um where if you do something you'll have a set effect on a system. And that's always true, but and then you have the once it starts to change in the social sciences, where suddenly you start to envelop a type of social logic. And I mean, you could definitely argue that there's a a fixed logic for the social realm as well. That's like what the basis of like religion is. And certainly there are like things that are generally cultural or cultural universals. Like murder is prohibited. Um Typically incest will be prohibited. But there is a lot of variation in those topics. Well, not those topics specifically. I feel like it's I mean
Yeah,
more severe, obviously,
but yeah, but I mean, we're kind of talking right now about the constitutional interpretation and constitutional law. So
yeah,
like, yeah,
yeah.
and there's like a fundamental question about abortion because the idea behind Roe v. Wade is that the fetus is like not a human because it's not viable. So that's what the idea was. So if we don't consider, if the court doesn't consider it a human, then it's pretty much they don't have to, it doesn't have rights, and then basically it'd be any law trying to um, restrict, trying to interfere with right to privacy, which was established in another Supreme Court case called Griswold versus Connecticut, which is not another case I don't agree with, which is like that right to privacy is a constitutional right because of the Ninth Amendment. It's basically there's like a lot of stretching going on there, but I think like so it's there's like a lot of, and one thing I kind of don't really like, this is something a lot of like Republican appointed justices say when they are being questioned by the Senate or whatever. They're like saying, they keep saying like, oh, precedent is important, precedent is important, this case is a precedent, blah blah blah. It's like, no, who cares about those cases? We're talking about the your job isn't to interpret those cases, your job is to interpret the Constitution. Like, the whole point of the court is to interpret the law, not to interpret its own decisions, because in the end, the law is what they're supposed to protect, not their own judicial decrees.
yeah, yeah. Which I would agree with that, but well, to an extent. But I'd say that it's you have to get down to like just arguments on the the moral value of different potential actions, I guess. And I sent a video to you two, although I'm not sure if you guys watched it or not. It's the Destiny questioning.
Yeah, I fell asleep. When I got to it, it was too late at night.
Yeah, yeah.
And I
But
don't know.
essentially, he explains that the fundamentals of morality are that there's an internal happiness essentially, and essentially anything that is moral comes from fulfilling that internal happiness. But since we're not just living in our own worlds without any other individuals, it has to account for other individuals as well. So, and that's where like a lot of the subjectivity comes into play, because like all of us understand what what makes us happy, at least to some extent, of course.
Yeah,
So
there's like physical happiness and there's like, I guess, emotional happiness. So like, I mean, you could be physically happy and like do drugs or jack yourself off or whatever, and you could be emotionally happy, which is like, so there's like the hedonistic physical happy and there's like the emotional happy, which is like, I don't know, you won the Nobel Prize or you've got like you got a Medal of Honor after losing all your limbs saving people during a war. Like that's like, it's a happiness that's more based out of pride.
yeah, yeah. So essentially, this moral outlook says that um, things like Christianity with the seven deadly sins, it's not as it's just about taking the extremes. So it's like the uh middle, excluded middle, the false dichotomy essentially.
Yeah.
Um
But anyway, I kind of want to get us back to like talking about the judicial philosophy and kind of
yeah,
like,
yeah. Um
What about the
so Roe
Sorry.
v. Wade, it's like trying to measure how important the personal freedom of something is, which is extremely complicated in nature, and we don't have tools to measure anything of the sort. Um, and then there's also like there's just a lot of different factors. Like there's just a lot of hypotheticals you could make, and it gets complicated. Like what the effects of birth are, what the effects of the labor process are, and different things of that nature. So
yeah. Um, yeah.
What about the
I
labor
guess,
process?
well, I mean, like I guess the thing that the central issue to the debate about abortion is like, when does life begin? Like,
yeah,
um,
yeah,
so,
that's the biggest question, I'd say.
so, the reason that Roe v. Wade, like the logic behind it is that, well, it's not a life until it's viable outside the womb, but I don't think that's really a good argument to make, because just because you depend on something in order to live doesn't mean that you're not alive. I mean, we've all like, I don't know. I'm gonna say this. This is kind of a little bit personal, but if it weren't for modern technology, I would have probably died when I was born. I would have.
I mean,
And
same.
same with my mom. Like, so am I dependent on? Am I not really a life because I was dependent on modern technology? Or, and I know that you, Triple B, knowing you, I know that there's plenty of technologies that you've depended on for your own life as well. So,
All right, let's not get personal here.
yeah, I
Yeah,
know. I'm not trying to make it too personal, but I'm saying is viability isn't really much of a. I mean, it kind of is a little bit of a contradiction of itself, because you need something in order to. You need to depend on something in order to live. That's kind of already implying that you're alive.
Yeah. Um, not like viability, but culpability, I think is what you're trying to say.
Yeah. Well, the art like the Roe v. Wade decision is basically based off the idea that, well, it's not a life if it can't survive on its own outside the room, which is kind of a bit of a contradiction of itself because it's kind of implying already that it's it's alive if it can't if it needs to be in the womb in order to be a growing thing or a living thing. So
Yeah.
it's not a very sound thing to base your standards off.
Yeah. Although let's make the counter argument to the Roe v. Wade logic for a minute. Um so the counter argument would be that what? That that life should it doesn't really matter when like the life becomes dependent, of course. It is or it shouldn't matter if life is dependent. It should matter whether the being is conscious and not like
So basically sentient, right?
yeah.
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 So there's like a lot of medical debates about that. I know that it has reflexes in the first trimester, which I believe does indicate it does at least have a very primitive sense of touch, but
Well, that would mean that the nervous system is has been developed, but that doesn't that just means that the organism of whatever kind of brain it may have is receiving a signal, but it doesn't mean that it's uh really well. We could get like really complicated with this. Because I was gonna say like it doesn't mean that it's really interpreting that signal, but technically that's incorrect. However, like if the way a fetus would get nutrition is through the umbilical cord, and so that's receiving a signal. But does that mean that it's conscious? I guess that's like the big big contradiction of the argument of the counter argument against Roe v. Wade.
Oh shit, he DC'd. Oh, he's back.
Oh shit. Alright.
Hello?
did I did you guys hear what I said?
I, I don't.
No. We got nothing.
All right, so what I was saying was like you're talking about sentience being a standard for life. So, but I mean, there are like I guess like the moment it can feel pain is still kind of up for debate. I know like a lot of medical organizations, like I think the American Medical Association, I think it's called, said that it's like you can't feel pain until like the third trimester or something, or at least till 24 weeks. Which I don't want to get too much into debate about that because that's just kind of just debating about authority, which is not a sound way to debate about things.
Yeah.
But I think it's been debatable because I mean there has definitely been instances of fetuses reacting to external force in the first trimester, so it's still kind of a debatable issue, but even so, like it's not a sound avenue for pro-lifers to use. So I think because it can even if it can feel pain, there are ways of administering anesthesia. So I think like we need to ask is like there are we all know there are already painless ways to kill someone after they're born. So I mean, is it I guess
Like,
um
is the pain itself, the thing that is morally wrong, or is it the death?
what's the death that's morally wrong? That's the point. Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah. I mean,
we all know that it's I mean in the first trimester, like within a few weeks after contraception, it already has an active mind. It's even though it may be very, very primitive, which pretty much the mind is primitive up until you're like a toddler. So
Hey,
I
curious, what do you
mean,
think about birth control or like Plan B?
what's Plan B again?
It's like emergency contraceptive.
Is that is that like a pill or is that like a condom or
It's a pill.
I don't know. I have to learn more about it, but I think birth. Well, here's to my here's my here's my advice to everyone out there. Like I believe that the one if you really want to ensure birth, like if you really want to ensure that if you really want the I'm just gonna put this out there. I think the one the bet like the only type of birth control that is 100% effective is abstinence. I like you can always I guess I really kind of I want to set them out. I kind of believe that a good message to for everyone to like a healthy message to live by is to I guess try to I think that
essentially, if you're trying to avoid like pregnancy or sexually transmitted diseases, the only 100% method is abstinence, basically.
yeah. And I think also one thing that I think our culture has kind of become over sexualized in general. I think at this point sex has kind of been more rather than being I guess a meaningful interaction between a man and a woman, it's been kind of more and more of a nothing more than a physical pleasure tool than it's been rather than something I guess special
Yeah, yeah, and that's ultimately
in the
like,
20
yeah, that's the one thing that I hate about just I guess culture today. Um or well, it it's like a lot of specifics, but the philosophy behind all this is essentially just that if you're going to have uh sexual activity, if you're going to be sexually active, uh then there is a potentiality that you will end up with a child of some sort. Um at
I
least
think
um and given that a person is sexually active, chances are that they are in a relationship. However, that's not necessarily true. But if you aren't in a relationship, then first off, I would just have to question your sanity to be active in that way outside of a relationship.
well yeah I
Yeah.
think that yeah
All
I
right,
think sorry
breaking
what
news, by the way. In Louisville, officers were attacked for putting out a fire, and 5 minutes ago, at least 2 officers have been shot in Louisville.
oh that's just horrible we can well after we I guess we'll eventually get onto that but go
Well,
we'll get back to
I mean, stuff's developing in real time, so I don't know.
yeah well yeah we'll keep a close eye on that we're gonna get to that eventually tonight but I guess I kind of just want to make sure that we keep on schedule. I believe that I don't know. I think our culture ever since the '60s has been ever since kind of the sexual revolution. I think has been a huge problem with like abortion and too many people growing up without a mother or a father. Like, and by the way, I really, really, really don't want to racialize this, but I just want to point this out because I've heard plenty of conservatives who do want to racialize it argue this, but it's definitely still a problem, even if it's been racialized. But the for the African American community, like the it used to be in the '50s, that used to be like 80% of black kids, I think, I believe, were born to a married couple. Now it's pretty much the opposite. 80% of them, I believe, now are born to single moms, which, regardless of your race, is it's just tragic. I think.
And same for Latino. I think that's similar numbers.
Yeah, and
Or
this is something that's bad because like the when you're born to a single parent, that's more likely you're gonna live in poverty. The more likely you're gonna you're gonna start looking in towards crime and stuff, and that's just bad. I think people need to. I guess this comes down to a culture that doesn't really teach people to how to make commitments. It's more of a culture that values hedonism more than it does value like long term planning, or I guess kind
Yeah.
of putting
And
putting
the,
yourself and your family first. I guess putting yourself and I guess putting what's best for yourselves and your family. It's yeah. I don't know. You want to go Triple B?
yeah, I think how this relates back to the moral philosophy that I mentioned before, that Destiny made a video on, and like the independent happiness or individual happiness versus uh other people's happiness, and how those interact, is that with action like sex, it is a very well, it necessarily involves another person in that there is potentiality to uh procreate, basically. So the the I guess sort of similar to like the burden of proof. You need to be certain in like, I guess I'm struggling with how to word this, but um in being confident in that you will be able to take care of another person, essentially.
Yeah.
Sex is essentially an act of commitment in that manner.
Yeah.
And that's the philosophy behind no sex until marriage. It's that marriage as an institution is a legal connection between two people. It legally binds them, and in that way they are committed to each other.
Yeah. It's the legal it's the official legal recognition of love, basically, is what it is.
Well,
It's kind of the
of unity, yeah.
of
Yeah.
unity. It's like a commitment to showing that you're gonna. The whole point of marriage originally was to kind of show that you're unifying and you're doing your duty as a human to pro to kind of recreate other to kind of carry life's torch again.
Yeah. Yeah. Um yeah. Which is why I've always like, well, and this is another thing. it is very, I think it's very true that, not in, like, sex-craved cultures or anything like that, where, like, a couple, like, repeats the process of, like, working, coming home, and then having sex, and just repeats it day after day. In that type of a
Yeah.
society, yeah, it's complete, like, it's literally a horrid, temperamentality to get into. Not just, like, as a sort of, commitment, type of mentality, but, I think it does cause relationships to, dissolve, of course.
Yeah.
But besides that, just,
Sorry.
like, outside of all that, there is the fact that, sex can, be a binding force in and of itself. Because, of course, people still get, like, divorced and stuff like that. Married. So, it's not like these things necessarily are already 100%, binding. But, let's say that somebody, like, there's, like, a 30% chance, or there's, like, a 70% chance of pregnancy with a, if you're having sex with a condom, or something like that. In which case, if somebody were to get just, like, really, really lucky, not, like, have different, partners or anything like that, but if they were just to be extremely lucky, and let's say they don't want kids or anything, um, then if they, like, won the lottery type of luck, then, I mean, yeah, they essentially just increased their bond with somebody else, at least in some ways. Although, in saying that, I think I specified, like, a number, actually. Not the 70% statistic, but, like, the sexual activity. And I don't want to specify any sort of amount of sexual activity, because that, of course, sort of, admonishes, that, like, sexual culture, technically. But that is still sort of a bonding experience in ways. And humans have evolved along those lines as well, technically. So ultimately, these things are sort of interlinked, which that's actually the definition of intersectionalism, which is why RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, was called a intersectionalist. But generally, intersectionalism is only defined as, like, a person who's an intersectionalist acknowledges, the areas where things may intersect. And the philosophy behind the, living constitutional philosophy, essentially, is that sort of intersection between topics, I guess. So, and that's part of, like, the thing behind, like, the, abstinence only education debate, which is absolutely stupid. Abstinence only is I mean, I could see the argument for it, but abstinence only, I don't think it works as an educational concept.
Oh, I mean, like, I don't know, like, I guess the problem is I really don't think it's a good idea though to tell kids that they should go going around like knocking each other up and like even with condoms or pills because that stuff could always go wrong and you still have it's not I don't think it's a good behavior that I want to promote because there's also more of a risk around there's more risks than just unwanted pregnancies because there's also STDs and all sorts of shit that it's also a problem. So I guess and that and also I just don't think that it's a good cultural like I don't know like it might not work because I know that kids are just gonna start resenting people or just gonna start resenting that and like say oh, I'm gonna have sex anyway because that stuff is cool and it's like
Yeah, that's
it
exactly what they're
doesn't
going to do. Actually,
sorry
Yeah,
what
that's exactly what they're going to do.
yeah,
yeah like like be rebellious and shit yeah but also I don't think it's a good idea just to promote the promote the bad behavior as well by saying, "Go have sex all you want, and just be safe about it." Because I think it's also not a good way to a good direction to steer the culture towards a more pro sex outside of marriage thing.
yeah, yeah. That's true. Um,
So you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place there.
yeah, and I think that's ultimately the nature of education. My point being that, like, I mean, it's not like you leave a part out of it. Like, children are, uh, their minds obviously are malleable and whatnot. But I think the assumption here is that the simple education will, like, uh, make it's like an assumption that it'll create the idea that it isn't as big of a deal as it should be. But if I mean it just depends on how well educated you are, honestly. Because like with how we were educated, we were taught essentially on the lines of exactly like everything we've said. I've said myself with like percentiles and things of that nature. And the nature of probability is just that it is somewhat random, obviously. Because even with a 99% chance, you could still get that 1%. Um, which is ultimately considered in the philosophy. Um, but yeah, I think it is important that like, I would be absolutely down to like taking out a requirement out of like general education high school curriculums and putting in a new one that is like um the standards of philosophy um and well, I mean, I guess it could just go under like ethics or something of that nature. But I think a broad outreach would be good because I think a lot of people get into ethic or philosophy through like metaphysics or things of that nature,
I
which
think.
is how I got
Sorry.
into the philosophy of well, that and the philosophy of science. But go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking though. I was thinking about a way, and because like I was really thinking hard about the like well we're kind of stuck in a we're kind of stuck in a crossroads between I guess, principle and practicality. Like the practical thing is you might prevent less births, like if you tell them how to do it safely, but at the same time, you might prevent more. Yeah, you might prevent more births. Sorry, if you tell them to like do how to do it safely and like put on a condom or use birth control, but at the same time, you're also abandoning principle, which is that you want them to. You're making, I guess, you're making a good short term decision, but you're kind of abandoning a long term decision, which is the culture we're going down, which is a culture that's treats sex as more of kind of like a pleasure material instead of like an actual an actual special interaction between a couple that's like between two partners. And I think that's kind of the big that's the that's the long-term effect that you'd be compromising. And it's like the idea, it's like also it's kind of like the whole it's the compromising your culture for
Okay, I'm
for
gonna
like a
stop you
short-term
there.
statistic, but also I think the thing we need to look at for, because like you Kaiser said, that kids, if we just tell them not to do it, just be abstinent, they're just gonna rebel and say, ah, fuck you, boomers, and then
I mean, basically, yeah.
yeah, but I mean, yeah, they're gonna um I think what you need to look at is, because I know a lot of these kids, like they get all their trends and shit from what's around them. Kids are very
TikTok.
impressionable, including teenagers. I think you need to look at like what's being what's being encouraged in our media, what's being encouraged on social media, and you need to. I'm not calling for, I guess, like government restriction, but we need to figure out like what's influencing these kids' behaviors. Like you see, like in pretty much every movie and TV show, like sex is pretty much just a consistent common theme in every major entertainment, every song, every movie, every TV show. It's And I don't want to be like that angry, like be that angry parent, like act like that angry parent who is like always has the sticks up their ass. But I mean, you got to look at the. You can't just pretend that entertainment has no effect.
Yeah. Um. Well, I think this only like it seriously comes down to like the personal responsibility that all the conservatives love to talk about, and like what is a moral obligation for like parents, that is. Um. So I think generally that like education in that scenario is the moral obligation here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you just educate them, it's not really gonna just telling the kids to like educating the kids. They're not gonna really listen to that much, though.
Yeah, but you have to realize that it's not just like the problem with educating not just about like um abstinence only. It's also about educating on because you're far more likely to do something if it's in your own self-interest than if it isn't.
Yeah.
So so let's say that with independent happiness, your own self-interest in that scenario is perhaps just to go into sex culture, um, and just you're a wild animal. Um, but in that scenario, the the potentialities, I guess, are also stacked against you in ways. Um, So, on the other hand, you have the thing I was talking about before with love itself and the like pleasure outcomes of everything. Love itself as an emotion is an extremely emotional a sense of emotional pleasure itself. In that, like, even like if you have a crush, even that itself is a pleasure. Just to be around said person or things like of that nature. Um, so, and then, and I mean, I myself, like, we're not getting very personal, but of course I've had crushes before and whatnot, and it's seriously, like, and I think it is, unhealthy at levels, of course, getting into, like, simp shit.
What are you getting to what?
Simp shit.
Oh, simp shit, yeah.
The simp culture.
Yeah.
Subcultures are so interesting. But seriously,
It's
like, when it comes to physical pleasure, the physical pleasure of sex, you seriously don't think that, like, the cultures of, like, Coomers don't exist?
I mean, you're not wrong. I don't know. I truly hate simps and coomers, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
They're
God.
fucking simping for my girl. I hate them. They're annoying as fuck.
yeah, it's probably, like, I am more, like, well, actually, no, because it doesn't have, like, moral implicature. So, like, the radical intersectionalists. And that's ultimately the nature of these things. Like, if you want to talk about intersectionalism,
Yeah.
intersectionalism is a branch of moral thought. It isn't technically like an extremist position on well, I guess like all moral all like philosophy is dependent on morality in that manner, but intersectionality, there are obviously different levels of intersectionals. Um, it's sort of its own like broad area on the dichotomy, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So, uh, so as for maybe we should transition a bit to
Breonna
Breon.
Taylor. Yeah. So getting into intersectionality and stuff. Intersectionality today, though, in the modern sense, basically is a philosophy and that is developed out of left wing circles, which is that um the more identities you hold. So say that if you're a black man, you're oppressed by racism, but if you're a black woman, you're oppressed by both racism and sexism. That is, I get that is apparently plaguing the whole entire American system. And if you're a black lesbian, well, you're oppressed by racism, sexism, and homophobia. So basically, I think it's a very destructive way of looking at things. It's basically the whole philosophy is kind of like, I guess it's safe to call it like a victimhood contest. which is like the more the more value that your words, the more value you have is the more identity groups that you can claim, which is not a very good way of looking at things. Like if you looked if, as we looked through history, like valuing people based on how many identities they can claim, it's not worked very well if you want to look through at past. So
Yeah. Which uh
it's a form of identity politics. It is.
I mean, intersectionalism itself is not technically, it's not well, you'd have to create a more concrete example if you were to claim that that was intersectionalism, but
Oh,
well, actually on second thought, not really, because you were really just like saying that the intersections were like the more identities you can fit in.
well, yeah, that's what intersectionalism is in like the social justice. So intersectionalism, it was created by a left wing intellectual named, I think her name was McIntosh, if I'm not mistaken. She was like she's like one of those ivory tower intellectuals who came up with the whole concept. She was a black woman who kind of it's kind of it's a new way of think. It's like a new way of evaluating how much worth you have depending on how many victim groups you can claim. So like the more victim groups you can claim, the more oppressed you are, and you should be prioritized in certain things, hiring, and how much how much your opinion matters because of, well, I guess the more oppressed you are, the more your credibility you have as an oppressed victim. So it's not a very good way of, it's not a very healthy thing to, it's not very good for have that. It's not anything good for people who are members of those groups. Like if you're constantly told every day that you're less likely to succeed because you're black or something, like it's not a very, I mean, would you even bother going through all that hardship like of like going to college and finishing high school when you're obviously probably going to just get knocked down anyway?
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I mean,
Like
yeah, intersectionalism is better for some things than others, but it should generally, I mean, the problem is that each of these things are so complicated, I don't think we could cover them, like, without, getting, like, way off topic in the first hand. Um, and it would just take forever to cover as well. Um,
Yeah, we're already at an hour and 4 minutes.
yeah. Um, so maybe we should just talk a bit more about like, well,
Taylor's.
yeah. Were you already like transitioning to Breonna Taylor actually?
Yeah, I was. I was gonna. I think I jumped too quickly on intersectionalism, but I was gonna kind of tie that to Breonna Taylor because that's kind of the whole basis of the entire Black Lives Matter movement is intersectionality and stuff, which is the movement that's been largely active in all the rioting and the protesting related to people like Breonna Taylor.
Yeah, yeah. Which I mean, Slapping things. I feel like just like slapping things with a label is a very counterintuitive thing to do. Obviously.
Well, that's what everyone does nowadays.
Yeah.
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 So, Kaiser, we know that you've been following Louisville pretty closely. We
I've
know that
just
some
looked it up.
news broke out while we. Sorry.
Yeah, fires, 2 cops have been shot, assaults on officers. I mean, this is. I don't know what to say. There's not much to say. You can't debate with these people. You can't. I mean, all that's going to happen is. If I had to do an accurate prediction, I think. In like a day, like tomorrow night or maybe a day after, there's going to be a response from a small group of right wingers, and we might see another Kenosha, but that's about it. I mean, this is just going to keep happening until something happens, which is around the corner probably, because
Yeah, I
obviously
think
politicians don't give a fuck. Like, I mean, the issue is with Breonna Taylor, it's not what BLM is mad because she's black. But the real issue is the fact that it was a no-knock warrant, because, in my opinion, her boyfriend had every right to, well, I'll just say this in a more family-friendly response, to respond to what he probably perceived as a break-in because of a no-knock warrant. And the same thing happened to Duncan Lemp, and he was apparently shot in his sleep, like actually, not even in a crossfire, which is what happened to Breonna Taylor. So yeah, I completely agree, but I just feel like, I'm not gonna be a BLM activist because they're a bunch of commies and they don't care about life, liberty, or property. They just care about their own freaking goals.
they just care about race, and that's about.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah,
So, I think that the it's complicated with the actual in what actually happened with Breonna Taylor, because I think honestly, like, well, going off of what I've heard so far from Kaiser and the media, like from what I've done my own research, is that um that I think both the it's complicated. I don't think anybody was in the wrong with the because the boyfriend probably had a legitimate reason to believe that this was a break-in and not like a drug raid, while the cops had a legitimate reason to believe that they were being shot at by criminals. So I think it's kind of a it could go two ways there, and that's I guess one of the difficulties maybe with no knock warrants, which I think sometimes no knock warrants can actually serve a good purpose, but I don't know. It's very complicated, I guess, and it's not as black and white as many would
no
like it
pun
to.
intended.
Would like you to think it is.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I don't know. I just don't like the activist propaganda that they act like the cops just immediately just shot her in her sleep for absolutely no reason, and it's just straight up fake news. Like, what I'm saying is they act like
Yeah,
they just like started shooting randomly. But yeah, there is a point, but I don't really blame the guy for trying to defend his home, because they didn't announce that they were there. So
yeah, and I'm a big believer in the castle. So
Yeah, and I literally just watched something about political neuroscience, and like it's like honestly kind of revel it's sort of like a revelation for me about like science with amygdalas, although I am skeptical of it, of course. But uh it makes me wonder, like, who's to say that like you couldn't make a thought experiment where like some like fucking like homicidal maniac like knocked on a door and was like, FBI, open up! Like, it just.
oh yeah, but that could
yeah, that happened
obviously
in
be
Canada
happen.
too. There was a mass shooter who went door to door saying he was a cop and then just killing people.
Yeah.
Which yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, some of these. I don't know. It.
I think the Breonna Taylor thing was just way over politicized because I don't know. honestly, all of these have been very politicized, over politicized, especially both Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, because I think like both were. I think George Floyd is probably you could find a little bit more dirt on, like Chauvin, who was clearly acting, who's clearly a bad cop if you look at his record and shit. But he'll also, it's gonna be very very hard to determine that, declare that a murder because there's like George Floyd had, and the examiner said that there was enough fentanyl in his system to kill him. That if there wasn't he was not being arrested at the moment he died, they would have assumed automatically that it was an OD. It's
Mm.
like it's like a very it's unknown, it's unclear. I'm not going to jump. I don't want to jump to conclusions yet because there's it's with I've heard with excited delirium, which is what is like the technical term for ODing, that it can easily be misinterpreted as asphyxiation. But also, I guess again, I don't want. I really don't know. Like, I have to look more into the details about George Floyd, but I don't know. Either or, it's gonna I don't know if at the very. I don't think you can. I don't think you can even declare though this a murder because of I. It's going to be very hard to. It's going to be very, very, very hard to prove that Chauvin intended to kill him. I think if he did die due to asphyxiation because of Chauvin's knee, I think that it's going to have to be like manslaughter. Then because I think you could argue that he was acting irresponsibly with handling Floyd. Although I think it was actually pretty much allowed in the procedure to like as an authorized procedure or an authorized procedure to put someone's knee on the neck during the time. So I think that would even be another challenge to convicting him. But
How is that? How is that so?
what? How is what so?
How is that an authorized procedure?
Putting a knee on a neck
Yeah.
when someone is like being it's like a way of trying to keep someone under control. I maybe Chauvin. I guess in Chauvin's case, maybe you could say that he didn't use it. Like, I don't know too much about the details about that rule, but I know that it was a lot. You're allowed. Cops were allowed to do that. Um, because like, say if someone was really out of control and like really resisting arrest, you needed to keep them on the ground so you could at least cuff them or something. You need like you can putting a knee on a neck might keep them still. So it's debatable whether if it's a good tactic or not, or if it's something that should be allowed. But I don't know. I think that's something we should. That's something that should be debated maybe another day. But
Yeah.
I
So
don't think it really matters. Well, I mean, I don't think this. I don't think it really matters in terms of the social response. I mean, people are gonna have their own opinion on it. I mean, clearly with the Jacob Blake thing, the day he
oh
was
yeah,
shot, there was a riot. The night
oh
of,
yeah, these rioters like
without
these black rioters.
investigation, nothing, not even the full video, not even the full context, and some more people died because of it.
Here's
Eh,
one thing I really, really, really don't like about the Black Matter movement because it's not a movement that cares really much. It's a movie. It's a movement that's driven more by outrage than it is why I really don't. They,
Yeah.
like these rioters and these protesters, a lot of them, I don't think they care much. They just want to get. They just what's important is the narrative, and the same goes for the media. Acting as their propaganda arm.
yeah,
So
yeah. Um, yeah. I think that's one of the problems. With a lot of movements, technically. Although it's definitely gotten worse. Like that specific aspect, I think, has gotten worse recently. Um,
It's more of kind of like a this. It's kind of this whole what's going on right now is like it's kind of like, oh, my feelings don't care about the facts. Don't care about facts. Kind of it's like, oh, feelings don't care about facts. So like it's the reverse of the famous Ben Shapiro line, like facts don't care about your feelings, which I know a lot of people, including you, Triple B, like are maybe not the biggest fans of Ben Shapiro, but I guess the statement itself, it's a pretty uncontroversial statement because we
yeah,
all know that facts are central to what runs like a reason what runs a reasonable if facts are central to rationale. It's kind of like, yeah.
yeah. Um, yeah, and I guess the biggest question is, uh, like whether, I don't know, like we, I don't really want to get into like a really deep ethical debate or anything. Um, so I guess on the premise of, on like Black Lives Matter, what is your opinion of Trayvon Martin?
I honestly think with Trayvon Martin, it's like I don't think we know what happened. Kind of like we don't know exactly what happened with George Floyd. It's like the only witness that was there to even say anything about it was George Zimmerman, which obviously is gonna have his own bent account of what happened. So it's not we can't fully know what happened with Trayvon Martin.
Yeah, yeah, um, yeah,
What about you, Kaiser?
Uh, I'm not too sure myself, honestly. I'm not very familiar with that story. It's very old. I don't know. Wasn't it sort of similar to like the Ahmaud Arbery thing? Ow, my head.
So basically, this kid who was like I think in a gated neighborhood, he he was caught like I think acting suspiciously or something. So George Zimmerman, who was a neighborhood watch, called the police, and the police told him to like stay where he is or something. He went anyway. He went after Trayvon. Eventually, Trayvon, but and the police found him dead. But he was like, um, it's unknown what happened. Did like Trayvon, George Zimmer?
Sorry, you're cutting out.
Sorry. So, did you hear? Like, so what happened was the so what happened was in a down in Florida, this black kid, Trayvon Martin, was acting like George Zimmerman called the cops, saying that he was acting suspiciously. George Zimmerman was a neighborhood watch. He was kind of guarding this gated community. So he called the cops, and then the cops told him to stay where he is, but he kind of went after Trayvon anyway, and then Trayvon got shot. It's unknown whether Trayvon attacked Zimmerman or Zimmerman just killed him or what happened. So, and the only witness account we have is of Zimmerman. So, not known what happened, but a lot of people are still saying that, oh, it's a lot of people have made up their minds anyway with anything. So, like with any of these incidents. So, the
yeah,
responsible thing to do is just to kind of say we don't know what happened, and that's that.
yeah. Um, uh, so how do we each view how all the recent events with RBG and even with like Louisville, do you guys now see polarization as getting worse?
Yes, and it's fucking like these Karens on Twitter saying if Trump appoints someone, I'll be on this like one like old white middle-aged woman's like I'm gonna be in the front lines of the Civil War. It's like oh my god, please shut
These
up.
Yeah.
women are not going to be prepared for. These women would not last a second in an actual
Look,
civil war.
most of us aren't prepared either. Are you kidding me? Like, I mean, obviously the fucking like far left is super organized too because they have like U-Haul trucks full of like riot equipment and stuff, and you just wait a couple months or something. That could be replaced instead of like baseball helmets and sticks and signs. It'll be replaced with trucks full of guns
I
and
think if
body
the
armor.
civil, I think if the civil war comes, we need to have all the militant right wingers put on the front lines and all the Antifa. They need to put them on the front lines, and then put all like kind of the conservatives and the progressives, like the I guess
Crazed.
non-militant ones, like just kind of
Yeah.
sit in the act, just kind of be the generals almost.
Yeah. So basically, useful idiots, right?
Yeah, we need to have like we need to get all these militant people, like all these militant far right groups to just do the fighting for us, and then let the other side use Antifa and shit, and like the John Brown Gun Club and Redneck Cult.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
don't know.
I
Oh,
consider
also
myself.
foreign governments would definitely be involved.
Oh yeah, definitely. We can't just ignore. We can't just pretend the military won't exist still. But
Like you know, eventually once one side, eventually on the fields are gonna get their hands on fully automatic Norinco AKs and like heavy DSHK machine guns and shit like that. And then yeah, because obviously, like you bet China would probably be backing like left wing groups, and it wouldn't surprise you if like Russia or something backed like right wing groups.
yeah, they'd make America their own proxy war.
Yeah, of course, it'll be like Ukraine or Syria essentially, except
Yeah.
us.
Yeah,
But
and
I don't
the
know. It'd be
U.S.
nice.
is just
Norinco, there'd
like
be more Norinco AKs in the market, so that'd be cool, and they'd be full auto. So
yeah, the
plus,
U.S. is just a huge target on the international scale, basically.
well, yeah, and then the UN would be deployed, and I don't know. Like, I mean, our
What's
country would be
funny
occupied
is
by there'd be Russians in our country, Chinese, UN. I mean,
what's
you
funny
name
is
it.
we've it's funny as we've been taking sides in both of their civil wars in the last century.
Yeah, now people are going to be taking sides in ours. Did they
Well,
send foreign troops during the
fuck-
first Civil War? Well, it's kind of a new thing now. Oh,
fucking play stupid games, get stupid prizes.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's gonna be right wingers, all sorts of right wingers. There's gonna be libertarians, people who want like constitutionalists and other forms like um Kant-isms, and then
Yeah.
communists and socialists and social democrats and moderates. It's gonna be shit.
So I
I don't
kind of
know.
want to
Don't pick
before
a
we go,
side.
I kind of before we go, I kind of want to talk about. So there's been calls by members of the Democratic Party to add more seats to the Supreme Court, as well as once they're in power, add DC as a state, as well as Puerto Rico and shit. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking, if they're gonna play the state game, why doesn't the Republicans just cut off the northern panhandle of Texas and make the UP their own state and start playing that game too?
True.
True. Yeah,
Because we could just split all these red states that have plenty of land already. And then we could just make sure that we retain our majority in the Senate. But I don't know. I really don't think this is a game that we want to start playing, but unfortunately it's becoming more popular. Like I haven't seen Republicans threaten that, but the
Mm.
Democrats are threatening to kind of add more states that would be obviously be Democrat strongholds. But
yeah. When it comes to DC statehood, I would advocate more so for,
just
um,
ceding most of it to Maryland.
yeah, yeah. I
Just
mean,
like kind of leave the Capitol and the White House and shit as a federal district, but cede all the residential areas to Maryland.
yeah, yeah. That's true. Because especially because I feel like, I mean, God, I'm I'm not even gonna like make any big statements on like Maryland because it's it's always just so complicated that you like really need to do your research and stuff. Um just because there's always political dogma shit going on, which I think a lot of like the stuff, like the reason why I said I consider myself somewhat similar to Destiny, is because I get the feeling that the division that Destiny has with Vouch is more so just um uh like not giving like proper credit where credit's due sorts of things on
Yeah,
Vouch's part.
yeah,
Um and I think largely he's like tired of uh re- rhetoric, um which like I get the apolitical sentiment, um like that, um which naturally I think liberals uh polarize towards the center in those scenarios.
Honestly, I okay, I'm gonna say this right now. Honestly, I don't really care about Destiny. I think it's interesting how he changed his position, but the thing is Destiny, like, I don't like, he's bitching about the left, but here's the thing, he's bad. He's as bad, if not worse, than them because he is like a very violent person, I would say. Um,
I mean, kind of like how his aggressive approach. You mean?
Well, yeah, he was saying like, oh, these white redneck militias need to start gunning down protesters, and he was saying stuff like that. And then like a couple years before, he was saying how he couldn't wait to for the day to start shooting conservatives, which is funny because his comment that goes against leftists gets him banned, but him saying he wants to kill conservatives and he makes bomb threats doesn't. So that's epic.
Well, I
But
mean, like,
still, like has a tendency of violence and being quite bad.
here's
I mean,
my thoughts.
if he was really like a moderate, he wouldn't really be a fucking psychopath. I mean,
Well,
yeah,
here
advocate you can advocate for self defense, but what he was saying is pretty messed up.
here's my thoughts on that because I think that, well, I think certain people do tend to get more violent rhetorically when they're like tend to have more violent rhetoric when they're angry, but I think at the same time, deep down, principally, I guess I wouldn't say that Destiny is worse than like people like maybe Vosh because I think well Destiny is willing to give credit when credit's due. I think, and also I think that Destiny, even though he might be as because I think Vosh he might Vosh might be in better more control of his emotions than Destiny, at least visibly. I
So you're
think
saying
that
like he doesn't expose his true self, is what you're trying to say.
yeah,
That was a huge straw man, but
Vosh
that's
doesn't
fine.
expose his true self. I think Vosh like I think I've honestly I can't say that I guess I can't say that we've all been pretty pissed out like deep down and we've all at least said or even thought pretty bad things in
Oh
the
yeah, I
past.
mean
Yeah.
yeah, you know the group chat I went off one time. I was super pissed. Yeah,
We've all been there. So I think just because Destiny exposes that more doesn't make him, I guess, a worse person than someone
maybe
maybe
he
like
just has
Vosh.
anger issues. Yeah, well, yeah, and I
Yeah.
don't know his like real positions because you know when he's talking about Kyle, he really sounded like, oh, just I don't want to kill people, but that might just be because Kyle was a right winger, you know.
Yeah.
But
I think
anyways,
I
Uh,
think Vosh though is more kind of in his own world than Destiny, who's kind of more in a more consistent, rational world. So
I mean, yeah, I don't know, honestly.
yeah,
yeah,
I see where you're coming from on that.
Speaking of
Um,
right wingers, who's placing their bets on the 26th? Oh, it's 3 days from now when the Proud Boys go to Portland. So are you ready to see more people get shot by paintballs and pepper sprayed, guys?
uh, they call
Or
me.
they're not gonna show up? Oh, wait, I thought you said something else, Triple B. I thought you called them something. But
Um,
no, have you guys heard about that?
no, I haven't.
Oh, yeah. So more stuff is gonna be going down in a couple days. This video will have to be uploaded soon. But yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And finally, I wanted to touch a bit on social logic. I guess I ultimately have like no big problem with a like overarching uh claim of a general logic line of logic. But as far as social logic goes, I I mean, obviously there are limits to it, and it can be like obviously used as a political tool. That's like um the main problem that any like coherent politically savvy lefties like really understand about a lot of politics with like the Democratic Party and things like that. Um but as far as social logic goes, it's it is entirely like how a culture shifts perspectives. And that's the whole thing of ideology shifts. Like, in any society, there will always be politics, no matter what society it is. And with extra polarized society, like what any like industrialized society you could say has been.
we're going real Ted moment right here. Be careful. I'm just kidding.
All right. Um. Uh. But anyway, I think like the there's always been uh those ideology shifts to what is the more like popular belief of what reality is.
Mm-hmm.
um and generally this isn't technically obviously it gets like really complicated with how people form like ideologies and things of that nature. But I think like the organic growth of ideologies is really complicated, obviously. Um, but essentially, uh, people yearn to be correct, so naturally they would seek out truth, and that's a social bias, by the way. In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's a social bias. So, but then it becomes even more difficult when like you talk about like um whether those social biases are um like how strong they are, because that's like the whole Marxian idea of uh monetary economics involves like uh social lives essentially
Mm-hmm.
as much as anything else essentially, uh because it is more or more value is a more necessary bias than anything else, I guess. But which that's like one of the only. I mean, obviously, Marx was right on some things and wrong on others. And there are, I think, definitely like a lot of examples you could look at. Just thinking of that alone. But I do think that he was right, at least on that. However, you then have to interpret that as how it should be incorporated into society. That theory of value. Which, yeah, it just gets complicated. I mean, I think even to a certain extent, like Soakdems follow that sort of path. But essentially, social logic follows the things that are more it's like a bandwagon fallacy in a way. That politicians will always commit bandwagon fallacies in what they follow, and that sort of reflects that social logic, is what I'm saying. So necessarily, social logic has a logic to it. Of course, everything does. Which is why I think it is important to like go over like the intersectional logic and stuff like that. If only to like find the parts that's like actually influential. And a lot of these things, like, there are strong arguments on the right and strong arguments on the left, at least as to like what is correct, or things of, I don't know. I'm like what I said before, like I'm honestly like just trying to figure out the complexity, and all the dogma around you sort of does get tiring, which is why I can like sympathize with Destiny, at least on some level.
Maybe Destiny's just a doomer. Like, no joke.
What's
Yeah,
a doomer again?
Destiny, because he's like getting sick of everything.
that's not necessarily a doomer, but it is sort of a nihilistic line of thought.
One thing I've learned about nihilists is that there's two types of nihilists. There's the happy nihilist and there's the sad nihilist. The happy nihilists like to interpret the world as pretty much full of clowns, and the sad nihilists are pretty much the black-pilled whiners.
The whiners.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, I don't know, I think that's like the basis of like weeb culture to an extent.
The black-pilled.
No, happy nihilism.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you just eat some tendies in your basement while watching JoJo's. I mean, that's pretty epic. Waiting for the world to collapse.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
just like you're pretty much honking everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's like our one real big objective as far as this channel. And of course, like, we'll probably integrate other things eventually. I mean, as of right now, we're sort of scattered trying to keep up with information. It's an election year and shit. And I mean, it's a really unique election year.
Yeah, I can't wait to make the final episode of our podcast just titled "The Collapse."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Another example of a happy nihilist, JREG.
yeah, yeah,
Basically, yeah.
basically. Um, oh, what's this? Tim
I
Pool.
don't know. Oh
Tim
God,
Pool on my recommendation list. What the fuck?
I've watched a recent video of it. What was that video? Oh, that YouTube was censoring a Kyle Rittenhouse, a Kyle Rittenhouse video.
Hmm. God. Yeah, I mostly just watch these to get the arguments and like the try to dissect the logic. Although I haven't been able to keep up with it recently. Um. So yeah, that's sort of the structure of what I'm talking about, and I think I think it may be possible that like with the intersectionalist movement, like with the morality of destiny and how he sort of covered all of that, which by the way, it is a golden rule of Christianity: treat others as you would have them treat you. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and historically there's been um problems with that. I mean, in like if you were to look at BLM and the arguments on economics for the left, it is largely about uh social mobility, which of course the video that Snake you sent to us in the group chat went over that. But ultimately, that brings about the question of like, all right, so there is like social mobility, but that doesn't necessarily uh, mean that it's always like necessitated purely uh, on what is like given in a capitalist society, or like what would be the ideal form and things of that nature. So, I mean, I don't know. I think intersectionality, at least as I was describing it, um like with the discussion on abstinence only education and sex. I think it's really interesting in general. And I think that like with giving proper credit where credit's due, I think that's a problem I have with a lot of the right wing media. And that's one of the problems I have with Ben Shapiro, actually. Um, because the reason to me why like Ben Shapiro is like grading the ideologue hack like line, and he's like definitely more of an ideologue than a hack. That's for sure. Um, but I'd say like a lot of the talking points I feel like I don't know, I get stuck up with like what rhetoric is are people using, I think. So yeah, just cuz like I think, well, obviously this gets really complicated like with philosophies on quantification and the nature of science, and there's a lot to it to talk about like the dichotomies and all of that, which dichotomies are essential to essentially when I reference dichotomies, I'm essentially saying the same the philosophy of quantification.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Although
Anyway,
in
yeah.
multiple ways, but yeah, so there's a lot to think about, and I guess that's like what we'll be covering up until the election. Sort of these different facets of logic and all the interconnectedness, uh, the meaning of things and shit.
Yeah.
Mm.
Anyway, I know it's getting kind of late and shit. I kind of want to point out there that
Yeah, we're almost
we
on
are
2 hours.
we're gonna do a video on the upcoming debate next week about the Joe Biden and Donald Trump are debating. I think it's
I can't wait.
I think honestly those just gonna be pretty much just nothing but other than ad hominems coming left and right back and blah blah.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I know we're like trying to talk about like logic, but at this point, no one is adhering to any sort of logic. Or, I
Yeah,
mean, it's just you're going against a mob, and you're going against a mob of people, aka like the left, and then people who are like obsessed with a cult of personality. So, like, you know.
yeah, and you cannot deny that people like Ginsburg did have a cult of personality. I'd even say it's quasi religious because
No, I'm
they're
saying about
literally.
like Trump, like
Oh
the
yeah,
right wing.
Trump. Oh yeah, Trump. There is kind of a little bit of a cult of personality, I'd say, on him too. Although I think most of the people who support Trump don't really care that much about his personality or kind of him personally as much as what he represents, I guess. Which
Actually,
is,
as a final topic, could we cover what the question of is Trump an ideologue or a hack?
I think he's
A
a
hack.
hack. Yeah, hack.
Yeah, I'm not voting for him. I'm not voting for Biden. I'm voting third party, guys.
You're
I'm out.
going
I'm
for
coming out of the closet.
Jorgensen.
Yeah, as much as I don't want to, I mean, I don't think she's a hack. She probably is, honestly. I don't know.
Oh,
I just want the NFA repealed. I just want to have fun in my life.
Honestly, I would
you're becoming a happy nihilist.
Yeah, I wanna buy a full auto MG3 and like go downrange and like shoot a watermelon or something. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, I'm
let's
voting for Trump. I think I'm he
just
really hooked me on the sorry.
let's create like a happy nihilist like third party. No, I'm kidding.
The clown party.
Okay. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, let's. I mean,
Send in the
I'm down for it.
clowns. Yeah.
I think
Wait,
it'll at least be very comedic.
Triple B, I'm assuming you're going for Biden, right?
I'm not sure.
Vote
pretty-
third party with me, man. Let's do it.
You're gonna
Yeah.
vote for Howie Hawkins then?
No, I'm voting for Joe Jurgensen and her My Little Pony running mate.
Yeah.
Spike.
What
That
about
was
Tri-
we
What
we
about
mentioned that in the video me and you made.
yeah, the brony.
Yeah, he's a brony. He calls himself Spike because he's a because he's a brony.
So
Even the third
yeah,
party's cancer.
yeah.
But honestly,
Yeah, Howie Hawkins though is the Green Party candidate.
I'm not voting Green Party. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I'm talking about Triple B though. Oh,
yeah,
I mean,
I-
yeah.
I mean, these fucking climate change activists are probably the same people who are burning shit in cities and rioting, so they can go suck my wiener.
They can go suck my green wiener.
Yeah, they can suck my coal burning wiener. Whoa, that sounds bad. That has two meanings, and that was really bad.
They can
Sorry.
suck.
My fossil
can
fuel
s-
burning wiener. How about that?
They can suck my environmentally friendly wiener.
dude, I feel bad for you. Methane's coming out of the wrong end.
Yeah, I know. It's I have to go get it checked out.
Got a infection down there.
Something's happening. Some tubes connected the wrong way.
Yeah.
I told you guys to use safe energy.
Yeah, I could have a nuclear. Never mind. Never mind.
You don't want to have a.
Don't.
Okay, okay. We're
Yeah,
gonna
this
get
is enough with the. Yeah,
we're gonna
I'm
yeet it off
ob-
of YouTube.
I'm obviously going for Trump. I think he really hooked me when he said that he was going to go after the critical race theory in federal government and the federal contractors. So he hooked me there.
Yeah,
So
that was pretty
that's
decent,
pretty
honestly.
based.
Because I mean, California wants to put the freaking 1619 project in their school, and I mean that's just like really sketchy history, and that's really politically motivated. But then again, in my opinion, I don't think it'll be much different from the 1776 project.
Well, the
Yeah.
1776 project I think is a lot better for our country than the 1619 project, which is basically to teach us that everything about our history is a direct result of slavery instead of like saying, "Hey, we're good." Because I mean, say, here's the accurate way to look at history, and this is the way I've been taught in history before everything kind of became all racially conscious and shit. I was taught in history that our country is a great country. However, there are some things in our past that we shouldn't be proud of. The Indian Removal Act or slavery. I think that's a very good way to teach history. Like we're a great country. Our country's done many great things. A lot we're lucky to live in our country, but at the same time, we've still got things in our past that are not so great, like that we should have done better, like slavery and stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good. I think not every country is not no country is without its flaws, including the U.S.
Yeah. Yeah. Um. Uh. Anyway. I guess.
What?
I guess that's sort of. Well, I don't really have much else to comment on.
I have a couple things as a closer. I don't like the way crap's heading. So I don't know. Start stocking up on food. Have a plan. That's what I'm doing. I'm going full prepper. I'll be on Doomsday Prepper in a month. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going. Obviously not. But like, I mean, I don't know. Probably a good idea to start becoming more self-sufficient and have that frame of mind for the coming year, maybe. I mean, who knows what's gonna be happening.
You should have
It's
your own
also
private.
election year.
You should
Huh?
have your own private bunker to wait out the Civil War like ANCAP would.
Yeah, basically with your own recreational McNukes
Yeah,
and Big Mac dispenser, Travis Scott burger dispenser.
yeah.
Yeah.
You can't have a nuclear bunker without your own big burger dispenser.
Yeah, voice crack. Yeah, I'll also get my Mick Harrier. It's gonna be a AV8B Harrier with a McDonald's skin on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh.
But yeah, no, jokes aside, I don't know. Stuff's crazy, man.
Honestly, I would be down for voting. Like, if we could get a base to vote a specific third party, I would be down for it, whatever the party.
Yeah. I'm voting for a Republican. I'm still voting for Trump. I'm still a Republican. I think the Republican Party still represents my views a lot. So,
The only Republican that really represents my views is like Rand Paul.
yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah, I don't know. This is what happened with the Tea Party movement. They were a bunch of neocons, and the Tea Partiers were like, hey, let's form our own group. The Tea Party
Yeah.
movements is like, yeah, I don't know.
They're the
I don't know.
like the Tea Party movement is like the European style socialists.
No. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about. I thought you were trying to say they were. Yeah. Anyways, we gotta
The
end this.
Europe. Yeah. Anyway, we gotta get going. But thank you all for watching. stay tuned for our analysis for the Trump Biden debate. It's probably going to be what we expect, which is just Biden accusing Trump of murder and Trump saying that Biden is slow and sleepy and stuff. So, yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anyway,
See,
you're gonna
I guess, yeah, I'll outro. See you around. To
and make sure that your genitals use clean energy.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, can we end it now?
remember to stay green downstairs. Stay out of the shit show.
Stay
Yep.
tuned, fellas.